Thank you for coming, everybody, and a big thank you and a big welcome to Johnny Latham, who is one of the psychologists from the Liverpool team, and he's representing this evening the national group of psychologists who operate across all of the TTP sites in England, and Johnny will explain more about that. So over to you, Johnny.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. Can everyone hear me okay? Joe, give me a nod if you can. Yeah. Yeah, fab. Okay, lovely. Yeah, I'm Johnny Latham, like Joe said. I'm one of actually four psychologists that work into the hematology team. And then I'm probably the person you'd meet if you were diagnosed with TTP or you live in this area with TTP. And it's actually a real pleasure to be invited here. Um, we don't always get these opportunities to speak to all our patients in one go, or I guess a kind of national group. So I really do feel honored to be invited, but also because TTP uh, patients are my favorite patient group. I mean, you might think I'm just trying to charm you all there, but I think partly it's because many people come to us when they've had this kind of sudden experience, and I get to journey with many of you to that point where you feel like you can be yourself again, and where life feels meaningful again. And the great thing about TTP is that for the vast majority of people, um, you can get to that point. So it's a really nice journey we can go on with you. Today, I'm specifically going to talk about that finding confidence again. It's a really common thing that people find that when they go through TTP, it can really knock them for six. And I want to talk to you today about kind of how do you get back on your feet after something like that. And I guess also after a relapse, or maybe if you're feeling like you're on edge because you're worried about relapse, we'll talk about that too. Um, so I am one of a number of psychologists and psychotherapists who work across the nine specialist centres over 11 sites. And that's because some of the specialist centres, um, like Southampton and Cambridge, I think I'm going to say, the same psychologist offer and the same medical team offers support to both of those areas. But most other sites have a dedicated team in that area. And if you're not aware of who your psychologist is, we can figure that out together, or Joe can put you in the right direction. I know on the website there's information on the TTP patient support website. There's information there. Um, so let me just outline a little bit about what I'm going to be covering today. Um, I'm going to be talking in a second, or a little bit about, well, I'm going to be finding out a little bit about what your experience has been, just so I can get a sense of, um, I guess, how TTP has affected each of you, perhaps in different ways or similar ways. We'll find out. Um, then we'll talk about some of the common things that happens for people. So certainly people experience an increase in worry after TTP on the whole. And then we also find that confidence drops. And so I want to talk about how to rebuild some of that confidence, to pay attention to when worry can sometimes get in the way of living a meaningful life. Um, and then I wanted to talk about a real life example of how sometimes people put their life on hold, and maybe we don't always need to actually to do that. So I'm going to talk about holidays and then finish with just a recap of some of the strategies that we've been kind of flicking through as we've gone through here. And if we have time, which I hope we will, I know we've started just a touch later, but I think there'll still be time to have a bit of a discussion where you can ask me some questions, and if I can answer them, great. And it might be that there's some questions I can't answer, and I might direct you to other places or come back to you. So I thought it would be important to just start with being quite real here. TTP for many of you has been quite scary. Um, and for many people uh, coming through TTP, people report changes in both their body and also their mind and maybe a few other places. And that's really real. So I wondered if we could just start with being really real with each other, um, and find out what your experiences have been about how TTP might have affected you. Just as a reminder that if you're watching the recording, everything after this point that's involving people sharing has been taken out um, of the recording. So I'd like you to, in the chat box, if you're happy to, um, I'd like you to just put just a line or two about what feels hardest to get back to. And if you don't feel like doing this in the chat, you might want to just get a little bit of pen and paper or open a Word document and just write some notes to yourself there, because this might be a useful moment for reflection. But if you can, it'll be really helpful just to see what different people who are here are feeling or have been going through. So what feels hardest to get back to? How do you feel about making future plans? We've kind of touched on it a little bit there, but like holidays, how are people feeling about that? Do people feel like they can kind of just get up and go? Do people feel hesitant? Is there something else? If you've not already mentioned it, are there any other kind of worries that show up? Or maybe what's the most dominant worry? If you kind of really just sat down and gave your brain time, what's the thing that pops up for you? Yeah, we're not here, I guess, to pretend that all of those fears and thoughts aren't true. I think we need to be really honest and real with each other, that these are the things that float around our mind all the time. And they go through waves, they come and they go. Sometimes we have periods of time we don't think about anything, and sometimes it just feels like there's a lot of thoughts there. And we'll pay attention to that as we go through today. I think the reality is that living with TTP often brings a range of challenges that extends beyond a medical crisis. And yes, we have all the immediate healing stuff. And often I describe the body as, and people who've worked with me before, they might have heard this before, maybe sick of it as well. But the body has gone through so much when it's faced TTP, and it's come through the other side. Let's remember that. But I guess it's left us with maybe some small tears in parts of our fibers in our body. Perhaps there's been small clots and blockages. The brain has had to sometimes make adjustments to navigate its way around blockages. Same with all the vessels in the body. And perhaps then specialists on top, when you're in the hospital, made some changes in your body uh, to keep your body working. And so now the body has to go through a period of repair. And for some of you, you've been years without ever having been in hospital, and that's great. And you're probably past the point of repair now, but for others, you might have just had an experience in hospital, maybe in the last year, and the body, I almost imagine, like just knits itself together. It's a really gentle, slow process. It's an incredible process. But often we can feel quite tired and exhausted because a lot of the energy from the body, it goes into doing those kind of small, detailed repairs. But on top of that, both during and after uh, we've had an inpatient admission, we notice that sometimes the body kind of holds on to some things even after it's done its repairs. So sometimes our body holds on to things like fatigue, headaches, changes in concentration, changes in stamina. Maybe we become more aware of body sensations, maybe more aware of general discomfort. And that can affect our daily functioning, especially around confidence. We've also got that mind that it remembers what happened. It remembers how kind of what a whirlwind it was for many people when we were first admitted to hospital. Sometimes that can be quite traumatic, and it can bring with it kind of fears of relapse, hypervigilance, increased monitoring of those body sensations, a loss of confidence again, a reduced trust in the body, and I guess maybe also thinking more about worst case scenarios. The other thing to hold in mind, again, reality checking. Oh, I realized I didn't change my screen. Let me do that. Um, is that actually life also changes once people have a condition. So you'll all be accustomed to more appointments, things that you had to put in your diary that you never used to, maybe reliance on others for support, or even basic needs like shopping or picking kids from school. And that's particularly hard if you were really independent before. Financial impacts, family kind of feeling a bit more protective or clingy
Sorry.
or distant. Oh, I can hear an audio there. Is it? Oh, have you gone? Yeah. Um, maybe even just kind of everyone having to just find new roles in the family. Maybe things just get a bit different. Maybe work as well. We've actually had to find new roles for ourselves in work, perhaps after an incident. So these combined changes, the reality of TTP can really make it feel hard to feel like we're the same person as before. Most people expect recovery to be physical, but I guess what often surprises people is how much psychological recovery there is in all of that too. And we often go through three phases when we go through a big health condition. The first one is survival. So the brain goes into survival mode. We've just got to get through today. The next one is recovery, a kind of drive part of us that says, right, how do I get back to normal, what I was? And then the third part of recovery, or the third part of the process or the phase, is rebuilding. That part of us that says, okay, maybe perhaps life won't be exactly the same. How do I build confidence again? And I want to really normalize something here. This isn't just linear. We don't go from survival, recovery, rebuilding in that order perfectly. So, as an example, a headache can suddenly pull someone back into survival mode, even years later. And we might then need to move back towards rebuilding again. So it moves backwards and forwards across our lives, maybe a lot less as we get more familiar with our condition. Worry after TTP is really not just normal, but actually probably quite helpful. And I bet you weren't thinking I was going to say that. It makes a lot of sense from a psychological and biological perspective. For many of you, something frightening has happened, and TTP often arrives without warning and can involve sudden hospitalization, serious illness, a sense of loss of control, often without warning. And the brain learns very quickly from those kind of experiences. It stores that experience as something important. So this is something I need to make sure never happens again, or something I need to watch out for. And it becomes much more alert on the whole, more tuned in to potential signs of danger. And that sometimes shows up as the body kind of scanning the body more, noticing itself more, thinking more about what could go wrong, trying to stay one step ahead of things, like trying to stay one step ahead of relapse. And in that sense, worry is trying to do something helpful. It's trying to protect you. However, whilst worry may be well intentioned by the brain, and I do think the brain is incredible, I don't want to downplay it, but it's not perfect. So, whilst that kind of process is really well intentioned, it can also become really over dominant and then start limiting our lives. So, for example, someone might notice a headache and their mind says, what if this is something serious? So they cancel plans or they decide to stay home. And in that moment, it feels protective. The brain is satisfied. They feel a little bit more relaxed. But over time, it can tend to shrink someone's world. So when I hear things like this, I can see someone is probably still partly in that survival mode or survival phase that we talked about before of their recovery. Some people also, I guess, often when we're in that recovery phase, that middle bit, we try and move forward, but we try and do it by getting rid of worry altogether. We work out that worry is holding us back, but we try and get rid of it. Really understandable. But I can tell you from my own experience, I find that it's very rare to be able to get rid of worry. So, for example, if someone's trying to get rid of worry, you might notice someone trying to push thoughts away, telling themselves, look, just don't think about that. Just don't think about those things, or distracting themselves, maybe putting on the TV really loud, maybe scrolling nonstop, maybe sleeping more just to escape how we're feeling. Or I guess the other way that sometimes people try and move forward from worry is to try and answer those thoughts. So going over thoughts again and again, trying like they're kind of a puzzle to be solved, um, or kind of trying to get a bit of certainty. So is that a bruise? Is that something I need to respond to? I need to just double check. Let me look that up online. Trying to kind of feel that sense of calm. Um, but it's rare to be able to either push worry away or kind of problem solve it away. It's really understandable to try to do that to get rid of worry, but we find that it actually comes back and sometimes it doubles down a bit. What is possible, though, is not getting rid of worry, but actually changing our relationship with it. Not fighting these threat responses, but responding with a bit more understanding and care. And that leads us to quite an important question. If worry is trying to protect us, why don't we just leave it alone? Why don't we just let the brain do its thing? What does it actually cost us over time? Well, because what many people describe to me for sure is that over time their confidence tends to drop as we let worry do its thing. So it's got that protective element, but essentially it kind of leaves us cowering in the corner if we let it just rule the roost. And I guess reduced confidence is a natural response to sudden health changes, and it isn't a sign of weakness at all. Um, and in some ways, for most people who've never experienced a major illness before, uh, they tend to have a belief that the body is pretty perfect, reliable, predictable. It's almost like for many people who don't have any health experiences, maybe you before you had your TTP episode, we've kind of got this unconscious implicit trust that the body copes with whatever comes its way and that serious illness is unlikely. Um, but for many of us who've experienced a serious condition, um, who've had that sudden major illness, that kind of shakes that foundational confidence that we've got. So when we've lost that confidence in our body, we tend to want to help it out. And that's one of the reasons why we offer it that increased vigilance. The brain is like, right, okay, I need to boost my confidence. And by doing kind of checking out things, double checking my body for things, I'm going to feel more secure and certain again. Um, I guess another thing people do after a major illness that's when it shakes their confidence in their body is to wait for complete safety before re-engaging with life. But what we do know is that this moment of certainty very rarely comes. And so then people start feeling quite trapped in their body, in their home. Um, I wonder whether actually I could just pause here for a second. Um, and I want you to, rather than on the chat, just to kind of ask yourself a bit of a question here. Um, what's your relationship with your body been like since your diagnosis? Do you feel like you trust your body differently now? I know some people on the chat mentioned this earlier, but I just wonder if everyone could just check in. Do we trust our body differently now? And I guess the kind of follow-up question to that would be something like, what would rebuilding that trust look like? Um, Actually, not that long ago, I was talking to someone who had acne. They'd had acne all their life. But after TTP, that acne was something that they were really paying attention to because they were really worried it was possibly a sign of TTP. Now, when we kind of step outside of their world, it it's clear that acne is acne, but when you're in it, sometimes it can be really hard to see the wood for the trees there. Yeah. Okay. So let's just think. I'm mindful of time. Let's just think about how we rebuild trust in the body. When we've got that feeling like our bodies let us down, I guess these are some ideas that things that I've noticed have really helped people that I work with rebuild that trust and confidence. So, first one, your body is still incredible. Now, I'm a bit biased because I work in this area, but I think the body and the brain are the most amazing things. I still can't understand it. I don't have a faith necessarily, but I really don't know how we are so intricate and amazing. Um, and even after a health condition that's been so, you know, terrifying, we can still try and appreciate that our body still remains incredible. A lot of people, when they have different bleeds on their brain or anywhere else in their body, are amazed by the way that their brain or the body reroutes things. We talk about kind of neural pathways in psychology and the rewiring of those. Sometimes people can forget how to speak and then kind of relearn it, not really through practice, just because the brain kind of figures out how to do it. The other thing that I think is quite amazing, just to remind ourselves, is that um, TTP, the Adams 13 protein deficiency, and the mix of all that together, there's actually about 10,000 other proteins in there that have worked perfectly well, probably in the mix, unless you've got other things that have happened. So whilst we've got one that kind of didn't quite do its thing, the others did. And sometimes it's really worth reminding yourself and your brain and your nervous system that's on edge and says everything's going wrong. Per- Perhaps it's worth just reminding yourself how amazing it is still. Number two, not every sensation is danger. There's quite a bit of a habit that I notice. I think it's a human habit rather than something unique to people living with TTP, but there's a habit to label feelings as facts. But actually, I would suggest it's much better for feelings to be counted as data points. And when we make decisions, rather than getting a sensation and think, oh my God, what's that? To say, okay, I can see that data point, but I'm going to make decisions based on multiple data points across the day. I guess that leads on to the third one, noticing symptoms without immediate action. So something that really helps rebuild trust is slowing our reactions down. Fast reactions often suggest the brain thinks you're still in danger. It might even be releasing shots of adrenaline as soon as it notices something. So if you can choose to slow things down, we often think about breathing exercises because that's a very deliberate way of saying to the body, slow down. And you might need to help your nervous system and your brain feel safer than it feels. Um, we might use words like, we can slow down here. It makes sense that you're alert to danger, but I've got you. We're all right. Fourth thing there, testing things out gradually. Trying to get back into things can be really hard. If if you're straight back into something and you're surprised if it's much harder or more complicated or confusing, that can be really discouraging. I've got an example of someone who I've worked with who made cakes or decorated cakes. I think they made cakes and decorated cakes, but maybe it's two different skills. I'm not sure. Um, and they were feeling really sad and disappointed when they couldn't do it as easily or as quickly as before. So they decided to stop altogether. But actually, maybe cooking a fancy cake pretty soon after that, in that kind of recovery period, was too much too quickly. So maybe they could start with a basic recipe and work up to it. Um, there's ways to kind of slowly test out things gradually. Number five, allowing some uncertainty while still living. Are we five? One, two, three, four, five. Yeah. Um, it's really important that uh, we kind of allow ourselves to live with a bit of uncertainty because if we wait till we get certainty, we might be waiting forever. And I'm going to be talking about that now. Um, but I guess an illustration that works for me is uh, a very real one. Um, I was last week away and we were walking through a forest and there was a river. And the river, to get to the other part of the walk, you had to cross it. And there were some people who said, actually, I'm not going to walk across that river. I don't feel safe. I don't want to. Um, and they went back. And then there were other people who said, I don't know how to cross it, but I'm going to figure it out. And if I got those two groups of people at the end of that trip together and I said, how much did you enjoy it out of 10? Chances are the people who took the risk, people who faced uncertainty and had to go anyway, are the ones who got the most out of it, who enjoyed it the most. So enjoyment is very much linked with courage and uncertainty. And I guess that's where, when we do more things, uh, the more we experience, the more we grow. It's not the case that we necessarily get more certain. We just become more confident. And I want to introduce something I've called the confidence myth here. Many people speak to me about how they feel really stuck and they're waiting to feel unstuck before they do what they'd like to do. And essentially, they believe that confidence needs to come first, and then once they feel confident, then they'll be able to do the things they care about. But that's a bit of a myth, really, because confidence is usually a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. One waiting to feel ready can keep life on hold and unintentionally strengthen avoidance. I guess it can also cause further challenges preventing action. Over time, I would say I've seen people reduce what they do right down to a point where their body gets lots of muscle weakness, or they get increased brain fog purely through lack of challenge and that kind of cloud of fear floating over them. So certainly with TTP, you can get muscle weakness and you can get brain fog, but that really doubles down or that increases if you reduce your life down. In reality, confidence tends to grow when people take those small steps. So when they take those small steps, they can discover that they can cope, and then gradually they expand that comfort zone. And it doesn't mean ignoring anxiety or pushing too hard, but rather acknowledging fear and choosing to move forward anyway in a manageable way. Um, so here's the two contrasting patterns. One shows how confidence grows, and the other one is how confidence shrinks. In the confidence loop, something matters to the person. Anxiety does show up, but they choose to move towards the situation anyway, discover they can cope or cope enough. That's an important one. And then confidence gradually increases. In the avoidance loop, anxiety appears, and then the person steps back or avoids the situation, and then that leads to that short-term relief, but long-term reduction in confidence. And over time, avoidance can make anxiety stronger and then that life a lot smaller. So the aim's not really to eliminate anxiety from the loop, but to change how it's responded to. Both loops are really understandable, but I want you to pause to think now, perhaps, which one do I want to live my life by? And because it's football time at the moment, and I'll wrap up shortly. But I wanted to go a bit rogue and give an example from sports psychology, because actually I think it could help us really understand confidence and building confidence under pressure. Um, this particular example is from a person called Brené Brown, who is a social worker who started doing some research into confidence and courage, and now she does talks and a podcast if you're interested on daring to lead and live kind of courageous lives. So she uses an example of don't know if everyone remembers this. It might be showing my age. I don't know how old you all are, but um, there was a time where the England team, football team, kept missing penalties. There's a really famous one, David Beckham. Uh, and at the time, and for a number of years, the story goes that inside the squad, um, and in the coaching team, there was a lot of talk for a few years about technique. So every time they came together, they really focused in on penalties, technique, how they strike the ball, where they place it. Nothing really seemed to change for a couple of, I don't know if it's called seasons, periods when they were playing. Um, but actually, according to Brené Brown, the shift came for the team when more attention was given to the psychological side of things that was happening. And the idea was that it wasn't really about technique. These are all elite players and they already play in lots of other teams and they know how to take a penalty. But the difficulty was what was maybe happening psychologically to them under pressure. So the psychologists started helping players with something slightly different, not how to kick the ball, but how to manage what happens inside them in that moment, how to notice the anxiety, how to pause, to reset, and then carry on with what matters. Essentially, elite athletes aren't confident because they never feel anxious. They do. They feel loads of pressure. I mean, imagine all the audiences around them. The difference is that they've practiced performing whilst anxious, and they've learned how to have that moment, that kind of, this matters. I feel nervous and I'm still going to take the shot. Now, it might feel a bit strange using a sports example here because what you've been through with TTP is really different and often much more frightening, truthfully. But there is something similar in the pattern that can happen for us because after something like TTP, anxiety can show up. So maybe when you notice a symptom in your body or when you think about going away or making plans for the future, and the instinct is often, I need this feeling to go away before I can do the thing. But what we've been talking about here and what sports psychology can teach us in this example is that actually that's not how confidence tends to grow. Confidence doesn't come first. Confidence comes from learning. Learning, even when I feel like this, I can pause, I can reset, and I can still take a step forward. So the goal isn't to feel completely calm. The goal is to gently build the ability to notice what's happening inside of you, to take a breath and choose what matters, even when it's hard. And over time, that's what I believe builds confidence for the people who've really kind of gained confidence again. That seems to be it. So I want to use holidays as a really practical example because it comes up all the time, both in the nursing team, in with the consultants and with myself. And it tends to bring together a lot of the fears that we have. So uncertainty, planning, physical effort, being away from what feels familiar and safe. Um, and a lot of people I've spoken to after TTP have said that they've delayed holidays or cancelled them altogether not because a consultant said don't go on holiday, but because of worries about symptoms or relapse or access to care wherever you might be going. And I just want to gently offer this to you that if you're feeling like that, it really doesn't have to stay that way. You can feel kind of a lot more free with TTP. So a useful starting point is to simply notice what comes up when you think about going on holiday. So even as I'm talking now, you might notice a bit of reaction. Maybe that's some fear or frustration, something like, that sounds fine in theory, but it wouldn't work for me, Johnny. And if that's there, if those feelings came up, that's totally okay. That made perfect sense, given everything you've gone through. So rather than trying to push that away, see if you can just acknowledge that feeling comes up for you and maybe meet it with a bit of understanding. Something like, of course, this is going to feel hard. Something significant happened to me. And from there, we don't jump straight into big steps. If you've never taken a holiday, this might feel important to you. If you take loads of holidays, you might kind of just kind of want to listen and resonate with some of the things I've mentioned. Um, we don't take big steps at that point. We think in smaller graded steps. So that might be starting with a day trip nearby, an overnight stay, a weekend away abroad. That's a big one. That kind of going outside the NHS, going abroad to Europe, going a bit further than Europe, and gradually building up over time, not forcing it, not pretending anxiety isn't there, but gently stretching things to kind of facing that discomfort, being courageous. Alongside that, there are those things that you can do that genuinely help you feel more comfortable. So planning ahead a little. So you might want to do all the things like to just make sure you know exactly where all the local hospitals are, etc., etc. You can do that, but I think that's probably anxiety talking. And what we want to do is get back to the place in you where you were like where you were before. So this isn't about planning so much ahead. This is about kind of just planning like everyone else would. knowing who you would need to contact if something kind of did happen that you wanted to check in on. Everyone in our team has a telephone number for our TTP nurses, especially during the week. Ours we can text as well. I don't know if that's true across the country, but ours is really great in Liverpool. Working out with the nursing team what medication to take with you, understanding what your follow-up arrangements are. Even things like hydration, just checking in with the team, being like, okay, how much should I be drinking? I know it sounds like a silly question, but actually hydration makes a big difference to the body and the blood. That can give you that structure and support. And then I guess let's just kind of name some of the things that keep people stuck. So people don't go on holiday when they're, or they don't enjoy their holidays when they are waiting for that anxiety to disappear before they take a day trip or go out. People don't tend to go on holiday or enjoy their holidays when they're seeking reassurance from everyone over and over before they start taking steps. People don't tend to enjoy when they just put things on hold. So none of this is particularly mind blowing. But anxiety can be surprisingly powerful in how it shapes our behavior. And it can quietly, subtly move us into the back seat of our own lives. And over time, without really noticing it, anxiety starts making the decisions about where we go, what we do, what we avoid. And part of the work here is gently getting back into the driving seat, really. And just to reinforce it again, that doesn't mean that anxiety disappears. It might actually still come along for the journey, but instead of driving, it's going to sit in the passenger seat. And you might not get to choose whether it comes along. You might not want it in the passenger seat, but you can choose where it sits, how much time and attention you give it. Um, One really practical piece of advice as well, that I just added in, just a little note for myself before we started today is, oh, I'm mindful of time, so I will stop for questions and answers. Maybe we can go on just a touch longer if that's okay. Um, when you're planning things for the first time, it is important to stay connected to your medical team, or at least letting them know the plan for your sake, for their sake. They're never going to be bugged by you. In fact, there's people who are doing skydives with TTP as we speak, I imagine. Um, so yeah, we've probably seen it all. So do check in with us. But I guess one of the big things that sometimes happens is that worry can grow from bits of information we've picked up along the way that we probably haven't checked out enough. I'll give you an example. I remember someone not that long ago telling me that they couldn't go on holiday because they were immunocompromised. Fair, perhaps. But when we explored it, they'd heard that word in a consultation at some point. They'd held it in mind. They'd then looked it up when they went home. And then they read quite extreme examples. For example, the words used often in cancer treatment. And when it's used there are really significant restrictions. But in their situation and in TTP treatment generally, although speak to your medical team if you have heard it said about your condition, generally, if that word is being used, it's a much more mild use of the word. So for my example, their immune system was still recovering. It wasn't 100%, but it was definitely enough to live the life that they wanted to live, or pretty close to it. You didn't need to put things on hold. So it's really important to check those assumptions, bring those worries to your team, get clear on what it is that's possible for you and what perhaps isn't possible for you. Because sometimes what's limiting us isn't the condition itself, it's the extra bits we've added on around it. So I know I've said quite a lot. Just to summarize this slide, using my illustration of a car, sometimes anxiety quietly takes the steering wheel and we tell ourselves we're just being sensible. But months later, we realize anxiety has been deciding where we go and what we do. And the shift we're working towards, the shift we're aiming for, is gently taking that steering wheel back. Does that sound okay? All right. Can't see anyone on the screen, you see, so I'm assuming that's all right. Yeah. Okay. So this is pretty much our final slide. We've gone through quite a lot, and I imagine it's hard to hold it all in mind, but you can look back at this video if there's any bits that really have resonated or you'd like to just kind of check back in on. But if I was to summarize the main things I'd like anyone to take away, anyone who kind of suffers with worry or worry holding them back or holding keeping hold of the driver's wheel, um, I guess the main message is this isn't about getting rid of worry. That's pretty normal. That's pretty human for what you've gone through. It's changing how you relate to it. So I would encourage the first step to be just notice it. What's my mind telling me right now? In this moment, I'm noticing a flutter in my body. Is this anxiety trying to warn me? Is it trying to protect me in some way? We're not arguing with it at this point. We're just recognizing this is anxiety showing up. It's saying danger. Feelings aren't facts. Remember that. But it's saying danger. So we're hearing it. Uh, the second step is to pause, just a small gap, and ask yourself, do I actually need to act on this feeling right now? Because anxiety often creates that sense of urgency, like something needs to be done immediately, and often it doesn't. The third step, choose your next move. So instead of reacting automatically, closing down, kind of getting away from what the brain is saying is danger, you might ask, what would the version of me who's rebuilding confidence do next? There's a bit of a sassiness to that, but I like it when it's said in that way. What's a small step that moves me towards the life that I want to be living, even if I'm feeling this anxiety? Not a huge leap, just a step in the right direction. And then the final piece is adding just a bit of self-compassion. Because doing these three steps is actually really hard because you're not fighting against the brain, but the brain is saying, oh my God, and you're trying to reset that nervous system. So it's hard. So a bit of self-compassion, you might say to yourself, this is difficult. And of course it feels hard. Something frightening and crazy has happened to me. The tone really matters. It really matters that you're not telling yourself off. You're being really kind and you're being really caring. Because when we feel under threat, what helps to retrain our nervous system isn't more pressure, it's support. Imagine you're that sports psychologist rather than that angry football coach. You're going to be caring. You're going to say, okay, let's just reset. Let's have a go again. So summarize. Notice, pause, choose, and respond kindly to yourself. And if you can practice that every day, little by little, not you might even come out better than you were before TTP, at least psychologically. Everyone can do that. Family members, I don't know if family members are here, but if they are, very brief message to you. Um, those who love us really often want to help, but may feel really unsure about how to respond to when we're worried or scared. And they're welcome to watch this back as well. But I guess if they want to be really helpful, there's some responses that can be more helpful than others. So I often say listening is exhausting and it's worth the energy. So if you can listen attentively without rushing to reassurance, like, oh, you're fine, or don't worry, or maybe that is bad. We're just there to listen. We're just there to say, okay, that's hard. And when we care and we listen, people usually come to their own conclusions as their nervous system responds to you, relaxed and calm. we start to feel like maybe I am doing okay. Maybe I don't have as much to worry about as I first thought. You can encourage that kind of like gradual re-engagement with normal activities. It's great to help people rebuild confidence and independence. So maybe your job is to remind people to just have a go at things rather than being pushy. Maybe you could model it. So you could say, I tell you what, I'm going to have a go at this. It's something I've been really scared of. Is there anything you'd like to have a go at? Maybe facing a fear. We've talked about a little bit about how dismissing fears or reassurance or too much reassurance can kind of reduce self-confidence and hinder recovery. And I guess just having a bit of empathy. Now, the truth is, for family members, we don't often, when you're going through the condition, no, I can see people need to log off, but see you soon, perhaps. Um, it takes a lot of energy to be a person around anyone who's had a sudden life change or health condition that needs your support. Maybe you're now having to be the breadwinner. Maybe you're now the person who has to do all the pickups from the school. Um, there's a lot of extra pressures that perhaps you've just had to just take on and you've had to just grin and bear it. It's important for you to know that in many specialist centres, you might be able to access psychological support through our teams too. It isn't just for TTP patients, but you'll have to speak to your nursing team about that. And if we can't offer you something, we will offer you at least a couple of appointments to signpost you in the right direction to get support. So I made it 4 minutes late, but we did start later. So I think is that a win? I'm about 10 minutes behind. Um, let's just finish here. Before TTP, many of us assume that confidence comes through certainty. Confidence is just with us sometimes. We trust our bodies, we make plans, we book holidays, we assume tomorrow will be just like today. And then something happens, like TTP, that reminds us that life doesn't work that way. TTP introduces uncertainty in a very real and personal way, and understandably, many people find themselves waiting to feel confident again, waiting to trust their body again, waiting to feel completely safe before they start living fully. And that makes sense. But if we do that, life gets smaller. And as we've talked about today, confidence rarely arrives first. Confidence is usually the result of taking small steps whilst carrying some uncertainty or worry. A day trip, a meal out, a weekend away, booking something 6 months ahead. When we say yes to life again, even if part of us feels nervous, we're doing it right. So I guess the main message is that the goal of your recovery isn't to get rid of anxiety and fear. It might go, it might be fine. Some people have reported 13 years on feeling much better. But I guess the goal right now, if you're still feeling worry or you're putting things on hold, is to stop letting fear make all the decisions. It's whether anxiety gets to sit in the passenger seat or whether it gets to drive. And every small step you take towards the life you want, however small, is a reminder that you're still driving the car. So ask yourself today, just as we finish, what's one thing that I've been waiting to feel confident enough to do that I've actually been putting off, but maybe I need to make those small steps towards. And then what is the possible smallest step to take maybe this week?